My name is Grace Williams. I was 27 years old when the man I loved threw me out into the cold while I was carrying his child. I never imagined that 3 years later I'd stand on his doorstep again on Christmas Eve. Not alone, but with 3 little girls in matching red dresses, each one carrying a truth he couldn't run from. The snow fell quietly that night, covering the ground like a blanket, trying to hide all the ugly things buried beneath it. I could see the warm glow of chandeliers through the tall windows of the mansion. Hear the faint sound of laughter and Christmas carols from inside. My daughters stood beside me, their small hands in mine, their eyes wide with wonder at the beautiful house they'd never seen before. I pressed the doorbell. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. This was it. The moment that would either bring justice or break me completely. The door began to open, and everything I'd carried for 3 long years came flooding back. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Why does a woman return to the place that destroyed her? What kind of strength does it take to walk back through a door that once slammed in your face? And what happens when innocence meets privilege on the holiest night of the year? These are questions I asked myself every day for 3 years. Questions that kept me awake at night while I worked double shifts and studied by lamplight after my babies finally fell asleep. The Hampton mansion stood on Riverside Drive in Charlotte, North Carolina, one of those old money estates that made you feel small just looking at it from the street. I'd spent 2 years of my life keeping that house spotless, making sure every corner sparkled, every meal was perfect, every need was met before it was even voiced. I thought I was invisible there. Just another pair of hands that cleaned and cooked and disappeared into the background. But I wasn't invisible to everyone. And that's where my story really begins. I grew up in West Charlotte, in a neighborhood where people looked out for each other because we had to. My mama raised me and my 2 brothers by herself after Daddy died in a construction accident when I was 9. She cleaned houses, took in laundry, did whatever it took to keep food on our table and a roof over our heads. She taught me that honest work had dignity, that no job was beneath you if you did it with pride. So when I got hired as household staff at the Hampton estate right after high school, I saw it as an opportunity. The pay was decent, the family seemed respectable, and I thought maybe I could save enough to go to nursing school someday. That was my dream, to become a nurse, to help people the way the nurses at County General had helped my daddy in his final days. Blake Hampton was 29 when I started working there. He was the youngest son of Gerald Hampton, who owned half the commercial real estate in Charlotte and had his hands in banking, development, and politics. Blake had just finished his MBA and was being groomed to take over a division of the family business. He was handsome in that clean-cut, preppy way. Pressed shirts, expensive watches, perfect teeth. But what struck me most was how he'd actually look at you when he talked to you. Most of the family barely acknowledged the staff. We were furniture to them. But Blake would ask how my day was going, remember things I'd mentioned in passing, thank me by name. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I told myself I was being foolish. The first time we had a real conversation, I was cleaning the library late one evening. He came in looking for a book, found me there, and instead of just grabbing what he needed and leaving, he asked what I was reading. I'd brought one of my nursing textbooks. I was taking online classes when I could afford them. He seemed genuinely interested. We talked for almost an hour about medicine, about my goals, about how hard it was to juggle work and school. He didn't treat me like the help in that moment. He treated me like a person. Like I mattered. That's a dangerous thing when you've spent your whole life being overlooked. Started slowly. Conversations turned into coffee in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. Coffee turned into walks in the garden when he couldn't sleep and I was finishing my evening duties. Walks turned into stolen moments in the pool house, in the guest cottage, in corners of that massive house where no one would see us. I knew it was wrong. I knew the rules. Staff didn't fraternize with family. I knew the risks. But when you've been invisible your whole life and suddenly someone sees you, really sees you, it's hard to be practical. He told me he loved me. He said his family wouldn't understand right now, but once he established himself in the business, once he had his own place, we could be together properly. He said I was different from the women his parents pushed at him, the debutantes and socialites who only cared about appearances. He said I was real. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. For 8 months we lived in this secret bubble. I'd clean his room and he'd pull me close when no one was looking. We'd text late at night, making plans for a future that felt possible when it was just the two of us. He bought me a necklace, a simple gold chain with a small diamond pendant. He said it was a promise. I wore it every day, tucked under my uniform where no one could see it. Then I got pregnant. I noticed I was late in early February. By mid-March I'd taken 3 tests and they all said the same thing. I was terrified and thrilled and confused all at once. When I told Blake, we were in the pool house. It was evening, the sun setting orange and pink through the windows. I thought maybe he'd be scared at first, but then we'd figure it out together. I thought this might actually force us out of the shadows. His face went white. Not pale white like all the blood had drained straight out of him. He stood up from the couch, walked to the window, stood there with his back to me for what felt like forever. When he finally turned around, his eyes were different. Cold. Like he was looking at a problem that needed solving, not the woman he claimed to love. He said we needed to be smart about this. He said his father would destroy him if this got out. Cut him off, ruin his career before it started. He said there were options, clinics that were discreet. I told him I couldn't do that. I told him this was our baby, our chance to build something real. He said I was being naive. He said I was trying to trap him. Those words came out of his mouth like they'd been rehearsed. The next day, his mother called me into her office. Mrs. Eleanor Hampton sat behind a mahogany desk in a room that smelled like old money and roses. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She told me there had been reports of inappropriate behavior. She said several family members had noticed me being too familiar, too comfortable in spaces I shouldn't be. She said they'd reviewed security footage. She never said Blake's name. She never mentioned the pregnancy. But I knew he'd told her. I knew he'd thrown me under the bus to save himself. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a severance letter. She said I was terminated effective immediately. She said if I spoke to anyone about anything that happened in that house, their lawyers would bury me. She said I should take the money and be grateful they were being generous. I left that mansion with a garbage bag of my personal belongings, that check burning a hole in my pocket, and a baby growing inside me that would never know its father. I didn't cry until I got on the bus. Then I sobbed so hard the driver asked if I needed him to call someone. Said no. There was no one to call. My mother had passed the year before. My brothers had moved away for work. I was alone. I moved into a tiny studio apartment in East Charlotte, the kind of place where the heat barely worked and you could hear everything your neighbors did through paper-thin walls. The $5,000 felt like blood money, but I needed it to survive. I found work at a diner off Independence Boulevard. Long shifts on my feet, smelling like grease and coffee, but the tips were decent and my boss didn't ask too many questions. I was 2 months pregnant and terrified about what would happen when I started showing. I avoided mirrors. I avoided thinking too far ahead. I just tried to make it through each day. When I was 3 months along, I went to the free clinic downtown for my first prenatal appointment. The doctor was kind but overworked, seeing too many patients with too few resources. She did the ultrasound herself, moving the wand across my belly while I stared at the grainy screen. Then she stopped, moved the wand again, looked closer, called in another doctor. My heart dropped. Something was wrong. I knew it. But when the second doctor looked at me, she was smiling. She said, "Congratulations. You're having triplets. 3 babies." 3 heartbeats flickering on that screen like tiny miracles I hadn't asked for and didn't know how to handle. Triplets were rare, she explained. High risk. I'd need frequent monitoring, better nutrition, probably bed rest in the 3rd trimester. I'd need support. I walked out of that clinic in a daze. 3 babies. On a waitress salary. In a studio apartment. With no family, no partner, no safety net. I sat on the bus bench outside the clinic and I called Blake. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some part of me thought that knowing there were 3 lives involved would change his heart. His assistant answered. I asked for Blake Hampton. She asked who was calling. I said Grace Williams. I heard her repeat my name, heard muffled conversation in the background, and then she came back on the line. Mr. Hampton says he has nothing to discuss with you and requests that you stop calling. Then she hung up. That night, I called my Aunt Rosetta in Durham. She was my mother's oldest sister, a woman I barely knew because she and my mama had some falling out years ago that no one ever explained to me. But she was blood, and blood was all I had left. I told her everything, the job, Blake, the pregnancy, the triplets, the fear. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Baby girl, you pack your things. You're coming to stay with me." I cried then. Real tears of relief mixed with grief for the woman my mother had been too proud to reconcile with before she died. Aunt Rosetta lived in a small brick house near Durham with her husband, Uncle James. He was retired military, gruff but decent. They had a spare bedroom. She said I could stay until I got on my feet, help around the house in exchange for room and board. It wasn't charity, she said. It was family. I moved to Durham that weekend. Aunt Rosetta was 65, a retired schoolteacher with firm opinions about everything and a faith that could move mountains. She took me to a better doctor, made sure I ate properly, walked with me every evening even when I felt too tired to move. She prayed over my belly every night, asked God to protect those 3 babies and give me strength. Uncle James built a crib in the spare room, painted the walls pale yellow, installed better locks on the doors. They didn't have much, but they gave me everything. The pregnancy was hard. By month 7 I was on bed rest. My body wasn't designed to carry 3 babies, and they were running out of room. I developed preeclampsia, high blood pressure that made the doctors nervous. They wanted to induce me early, at 35 weeks. Aunt Rosetta held my hand through the whole thing. 18 hours of labor. 3 girls born within 20 minutes of each other on December 22nd, just 3 days before Christmas. They were tiny but healthy. 4 pounds each, give or take a few ounces. Perfect little fingers and toes. Eyes that hadn't decided what color they'd be yet. Hair that came in thick and curly. The nurses laid them on my chest one at a time, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about giving these girls a life that mattered. A life where they'd never feel invisible. I named them Hope, Faith, and Joy. Aunt Rosetta said those names were a prayer. I said they were a promise. When Blake still didn't call, didn't visit, didn't acknowledge his daughter's existence, something hardened in me. I stopped hoping he'd change. I stopped waiting for him to be the man he pretended to be. I realized I was going to do this alone, and I was going to do it right. If this story has your heart racing, comment, "I'm still watching" below. Let's see who's following till the end. The first year was the hardest. 3 babies meant 3 times the diapers, 3 times the feedings, 3 times the sleepless nights. Aunt Rosetta helped as much as she could, but she wasn't young and her arthritis was getting worse. I went back to work when the girls were 3 months old, taking a night shift stocking shelves at a grocery store so I could be home with them during the day. I slept in 2-hour chunks. I lived on coffee and determination. People would see me in the store with 3 babies strapped to me and they'd say, "God bless you," or "I don't know how you do it," or sometimes just stare like I was a circus act. I learned to ignore them all. I enrolled in online classes again, chipping away at my nursing prerequisites whenever the girls napped at the same time, which wasn't often. It took me 2 years to finish what should have taken 1, but I finished. I passed my certification exam on the first try. I got hired at Durham Regional Hospital as a nurse's aide, working my way toward becoming a full RN. The pay was better. The hours were still brutal, but I was building something. The girls grew. They learned to crawl within days of each other, learned to walk within weeks. They were different. Hope was cautious and observant. Faith was bold and loud. Joy was the peacemaker who wanted everyone to be happy. But they were also synchronized in this eerie way, like they shared one brain between 3 bodies. They'd reach for the same toy at the same time, wake up from naps together, cry in harmony. Aunt Rosetta said it was a twin thing multiplied. I said it was magic. Blake's world, meanwhile, kept spinning upward. I didn't seek out information about him, but Charlotte wasn't that big, and the Hampton name was everywhere. I'd see articles in the business section about his latest development project. I'd hear people at work talking about some charity gala the Hamptons were throwing. Once, I saw his face on a billboard downtown, something about affordable housing initiatives, which made me laugh bitterly given how he'd thrown me out when I had nowhere to go. He got engaged to a woman named Victoria Ashford, daughter of a state senator. The engagement announcement was in the Charlotte Observer with a photo of them at some country club, both smiling like they'd won the lottery. She was beautiful in that untouchable way. Blonde, thin, the kind of woman who'd never scrubbed a toilet or worried about making rent. I tried not to care. I tried to focus on my daughters, my job, my future. But there was this thing inside me that wouldn't settle. Not anger exactly, something colder. A sense of unfinished business. Those girls deserved to know their father. They deserved the opportunities his name and money could provide. And he deserved to face what he'd done. I started saving. Every extra dollar went into an envelope I kept hidden in my closet. I didn't know what I was saving for exactly, just that I needed resources when the time came. I documented everything, printed out old text messages I'd saved, kept photos Blake and I had taken together, held onto that necklace he'd given me. I even hired a lawyer using money I'd squirreled away, asked about paternity rights and child support. The lawyer said I had a case, but it would be expensive, ugly, and the Hamptons would fight me with everything they had. He said rich men didn't acknowledge illegitimate children unless they were forced to. Then, in November of the girl's third year, I saw an article online. The Hampton family was hosting their annual Christmas Eve gala, a massive charity event at their estate, attended by politicians, business leaders, and society families. The article featured a photo of Blake and Victoria. It mentioned they'd be announcing their wedding date that night. It talked about legacy, about Gerald Hampton passing the torch to the next generation, about how Blake was carrying forward a tradition of excellence and service. I read that article 3 times, and something inside me clicked into place. I thought about those 3 little girls sleeping in the room down the hall. I thought about how they'd ask me about their daddy someday, and what I'd tell them. I thought about Blake standing in a mansion full of important people, playing the role of the perfect son, the devoted fiancé, the upstanding businessman, while his daughters grew up in a 2-bedroom rental with second-hand furniture. I made a decision that night. I was going back to that mansion. Not to beg. Not to ask for anything. But to tell the truth in front of everyone who mattered to him. To put faces to the secret he'd buried. To let him see what his choices looked like in red Christmas dresses and bright brown eyes. Aunt Rosetta asked if I was sure. She said sometimes it was better to let sleeping dogs lie, to protect the girls from rejection. I said the girls had already been rejected. What I was doing now was making sure he couldn't pretend they didn't exist. I spent the next month preparing. I bought fabric and sewed 3 matching red dresses by hand, staying up late after my shifts to get them perfect. Red for Christmas. Red for courage. Red so they'd stand out in a sea of designer gowns and tuxedos. I practiced what I'd say, how I'd stay calm, how I'd make sure the girls felt safe no matter what happened. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. I dressed the girls carefully, braided their hair with red ribbons, told them we were going to see a beautiful house with lights and music. They were excited, bouncing in their car seats as I drove the hour from Durham to Charlotte. My hands shook on the wheel. I parked down the street from the estate, checked our reflections in the rearview mirror. 3 little girls who looked exactly like their father. Same eyes, same chin, same smile. Anyone who saw them next to Blake would know. We walked up that long driveway hand in hand, our breath making clouds in the frozen air. I could hear music and laughter spilling from the mansion. Through the windows, I could see beautiful people in beautiful clothes, drinking champagne and pretending the world outside those walls didn't exist. For 3 years she stayed silent. But silence has an end date, And hers was Christmas Eve. I rang the doorbell. The sound echoed louder than I expected, or maybe that was just my heartbeat in my ears. Hope squeezed my left hand. Faith squeezed my right. Joy stood in front of me, her face pressed against the door, trying to peek through the stained glass. Heard footsteps. The door swung open. A man in a tuxedo stood there. Not Blake, but someone who worked for the family, probably coordinating the event. He looked at me, then at the girls, confusion crossing his face. "Can I help you?" he asked, polite but clearly wondering why we were at the service entrance, except we weren't. We were at the front door where guests came in. "I'm here to see Blake Hampton," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's a family matter." His eyes narrowed. "I'm sorry, but this is a private event. If you need to speak with Mr. Hampton, you'll need to make an appointment through his office." I didn't move. "Tell him Grace Williams is here with his daughters. Tell him if he doesn't come out here right now, I'll walk into that ballroom and tell everyone myself." The man's face changed. He muttered something into a radio clipped to his lapel, then stepped aside but blocked us from entering. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared into the house. The girls were getting cold. Joy's nose was turning red. Faith asked why we were waiting outside. I told them we'd go in soon, just be patient. Then I heard his voice before I saw him, that familiar voice that used to whisper promises in the dark. "What the hell are you doing here?" Blake appeared in the doorway, and for a second time collapsed. He looked older, more polished. His tuxedo probably cost more than I made in 3 months. But his face went through about 6 emotions in 2 seconds when he saw the girls. Recognition, fear, and something else I couldn't name. The girls stared up at him, these 3 little mirrors showing him exactly what he'd tried to forget. "We need to talk," I said quietly. "Not here. Not now," he hissed, glancing back into the house like he was afraid someone would see. "You can't just show up like this, Grace. This is your children meeting their father," I interrupted. "You can talk to me here or I can walk inside and talk to everyone else. Your choice." His jaw clenched. "You're insane. You think you can blackmail me? I'll call the police. I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "Go ahead," I said. "Explain to the officers why your 3 daughters who you've never paid a dime of support for are trespassing at your house. Explain it to your fiancé. Explain it to your father. Explain it to the Charlotte Observer reporter I see through that window." He thought he buried the past. But the past walked through his front door. Blake's face went red, then white. "You wouldn't dare. Watch me." For a long moment we just stared at each other. The girls sensed the tension and pressed closer to me. Then a voice called from inside. Deep, authoritative. "Blake. What's going on?" Gerald Hampton appeared behind his son, dressed in a full tuxedo with medals on his chest from some civic organization. He was in his 70s, silver-haired, with a kind of presence that made you stand straighter without thinking about it. He looked at me, at the girls, then at his son. "Who are these people?" Before Blake could answer, I spoke. "My name is Grace Williams, Mr. Hampton. I worked for your family 4 years ago. These are your granddaughters, Hope, Faith, and Joy. They're 3 years old. Blake is their father." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Gerald's eyes moved from me to the girls, really looking at them for the first time. I watched his face change as he saw what I saw, the unmistakable Hampton features, the eyes, the expressions. He looked at Blake. "Is this true?" Blake's mouth opened and closed. "Dad, this is not the time or place." "Is true." Blake's shoulders slumped. "She's lying. She's trying to scam us." "There's no proof." I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket. "There's proof. Photos of us together. Text messages. The necklace you gave me. Medical records showing I was pregnant when your mother fired me. Birth certificates listing father unknown because you refused to acknowledge them. I have everything documented. I didn't come here for money. I came here because these girls deserve to know their father, and you deserve to face what you did." Gerald took the envelope, opened it right there in the doorway. I saw his face harden as he flipped through photos of Blake and me, read text messages where Blake called me baby and talked about our future. When he looked up, his eyes were ice. Inside. All of you. He turned and walked into the house without waiting for a response. Blake started to protest, but his father's look cut him off. I picked up Joy, took hope and faith by the hands, and walked into that mansion for the first time in 3 years. The foyer was even more beautiful than I remembered. Marble floors, a chandelier that looked like it cost more than my car, Christmas decorations everywhere. Gerald led us past the ballroom where the party was happening, down a hallway, into his private study. He closed the door, shutting out the music and laughter. "Sit," he commanded. I sat on a leather couch, the girls climbing up beside me, their eyes wide taking in the room full of books and awards and expensive things. Blake remained standing, his arms crossed, his face a mask. Gerald stood behind his desk, still holding my envelope. "How old are they?" he asked me directly. 3 years and 2 days, I answered. They were born December 22nd. Blake and I were together from June through February of that year. I told him I was pregnant in March. He told his mother. She fired me and gave me $5,000 to disappear. I haven't heard from him since. Gerald's eyes moved to the girls, really studying them now. They look like him. They look like my son looked at that age. "I know," I said simply. Blake finally spoke. "This doesn't prove anything. She could have been with anyone. She was the help, Dad. She had access to the whole house, probably was seeing." "Don't you dare," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut. "Don't you dare rewrite history. You told me you loved me. You said we'd be together. You gave me that necklace as a promise. You were in my bed 3 nights a week for 8 months, Blake. And when I got pregnant, you threw me away like garbage." "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Gerald raised a hand. "Enough. There's a simple way to settle this. DNA test. We'll have it done immediately, results rushed. If these children are Blake's, we'll deal with it. If they're not, you'll leave and never contact this family again." "Agreed." He nodded. "Agreed." Blake looked like he wanted to argue, but his father's expression brooked no disagreement. Gerald called someone, made arrangements for a private lab to come to the house within the hour. While we waited, he had staff bring the girls cookies and milk. He didn't speak much, just watched them with an expression I couldn't read. The test was quick. Cheek swabs that took 30 seconds. The lab tech promised results by morning, given who was asking and how much they were paying for the rush. Gerald told us to stay in the study. He said he'd make an excuse to the guests about a family emergency. Blake paced like a caged animal. I sat with my daughters, whispering to them that everything was okay, we'd go home soon. Hope fell asleep against my shoulder. Faith and Joy dozed off on the couch. Around midnight, when the party was winding down, Gerald returned. He looked older, tired. "The guests have left," he said. "Blake's fiancée is asking questions. I told her there's a business crisis that needs attention." He looked at me. "You and the girls should rest. There are guest rooms upstairs. We'll have the results in the morning." "I'd rather go home," I said. "I'd rather you stay," Gerald replied, and something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. "If those are my granddaughters, we have things to discuss. Running away helps no one." So I stayed. A staff member, older woman, kind face, showed us to a room with a large bed and an attached bathroom. She brought pajamas for the girls, a robe for me. I put the girls to bed, all 3 of them in the middle of that enormous bed, and I sat in a chair watching them sleep, wondering what the morning would bring. And what she said next no one saw coming. Dawn came cold and gray. I'd barely slept, jumping at every sound in the unfamiliar house. At 7 a.m. there was a knock on the door. Gerald stood there, still in his clothes from the night before, like he hadn't slept either. He held a folder. "The results came an hour ago," he said. "May I come in?" I nodded, checked that the girls were still asleep. He sat in the other chair, opened the folder, and showed me the paper inside. 99.9% probability of paternity. All 3 girls. Blake was their father. Gerald closed the folder slowly, his hands shaking slightly. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough. 25 years ago, I had an affair. The woman was young, worked in our company's accounting department. When she got pregnant, I handled it the way men like me were taught to handle such things. I paid her off. I made her sign agreements. I never met the child. I told myself I was protecting my family, protecting the Hampton name. But what I really was doing was protecting my own comfort. He looked at me, then really looked at me. "That child, my son, would be about your age now. I don't know his name. I don't know where he is. I gave up the right to know the day I chose money over responsibility. I've regretted it every day since, but regret without action is just guilt dressed up as wisdom." He stood, walked to the window. "My father taught me that a man's legacy is everything. The buildings we leave behind, the name we pass on, the empire we build." But he was wrong. A man's legacy is in the people whose lives he touches, the responsibilities he doesn't run from, the mistakes he owns. He turned back to me. "Those little girls sleeping in that bed are my granddaughters. They carry my blood, my son's blood. Blake made a terrible choice. But I taught him that choice by example. That ends today." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we're going to make this right. I can't force Blake to be a father. That's something he'll have to choose for himself, and I suspect that choice will take time. But I can ensure those girls have everything they're entitled to. Financial support, education funds, healthcare. Their rightful place in this family's future." "I don't want charity," I said. "This isn't charity. It's justice. It's what should have happened 3 years ago." He pulled out his phone, made a call. "Robert. Gerald Hampton. I need you to draw up legal documents. Child support for 3 minor children, retroactive 3 years. College funds, full amount. Healthcare coverage. And I want Blake Hampton removed as executor of any family trusts until this situation is resolved to my satisfaction." He paused. "Yes, I know what time it is. It's Christmas morning. Consider this a Christmas miracle. I need everything by noon today." He hung up, looked at me. "Blake will fight this. Victoria will probably leave him. The Ashfords don't tolerate scandal. There will be questions, gossip, complications. But those girls will be protected and provided for. You have my word." I couldn't speak. This wasn't how I'd imagined this going. I'd expected denials, legal threats, maybe a quiet payoff to make me disappear again. I hadn't expected this. Accountability. The girls woke up around 8, confused about where they were. I got them dressed in their red dresses again, brushed their hair, told them we were going to have breakfast and then go home. Gerald arranged for food to be brought to a small dining room. Pancakes, eggs, juice. The girls ate like they always did, chattering and giggling, unaware that their world had just shifted. Blake appeared while we were eating. He looked terrible, eyes red, clothes rumpled, face haggard. He stood in the doorway, staring at the girls like he was seeing them for the first time. Which, in a way, he was. "They're mine," he said, voice hollow. "The test confirmed it." "Yes," I said simply. He pulled out a chair, sat down heavily. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a father." "Neither did I said. "But I learned. 'Cause I had to. Because they needed me to." He looked at me, then really looked at me. "I'm sorry. For what I did. For what I said. For all of it. I was a coward." "Yes," I agreed. "You were. But you don't have to stay one." Faith, bold Faith, slid down from her chair and walked over to Blake. She stood in front of him, studying his face with her serious 3-year-old expression. "Are you our daddy?" she asked. Blake's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," he whispered. "I'm your daddy." She considered this. "Okay. Can I have more pancakes?" Despite everything, I laughed. Blake did too, a broken sound that might have been a sob. He got her more pancakes. Then Hope and Joy wanted to sit by him too. And suddenly all three girls were crowding around this man who denied their existence, offering him bites of pancake and asking him questions about the big house and why there was a piano in the hallway. I watched, my heart breaking and healing at the same time. By noon, the lawyer arrived with papers. Gerald reviewed them, had me review them. Child support that would actually make a difference. Healthcare coverage that meant I wouldn't lose sleep over medical bills. College funds that guaranteed my daughters could become anything they wanted. And a statement acknowledging Blake's paternity, to be filed with the court. Sign. Gerald signed. Blake hesitated, pen hovering over paper. If I sign this, he said slowly, everything changes. My engagement, my reputation, my position in the company. All of it becomes complicated. It was already complicated, Gerald said. You just pretended it wasn't. Sign the paper, son. Face what you did. Start making it right. Blake signed. We didn't stay for Christmas dinner. I'd already been away from Aunt Rosetta too long. She was probably worried sick. I bundled the girls into their coats, gathered our things. At the door, Gerald stopped me. This isn't the end of this conversation, he said. I'd like to be part of their lives. If you'll allow it. I looked at this powerful man, humbled by his own past mistakes. We'll see, I said. They deserve to know their family. But they also deserve to feel safe. So we'll take it slow. He nodded. Thank you. For coming back. For not giving up. I didn't do it for you, I said. I did it for them. The drive back to Durham was quiet. The girls fell asleep within minutes, exhausted from the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. I drove through the empty Christmas Day streets, watching the sun break through the clouds, and I thought about everything that had happened. Not just last night but the whole journey. 4 years ago, I was a girl who thought love meant something, who believed that being seen was the same as being valued. I learned the hard way that visibility without respect is just exploitation in disguise. I learned that the people who claim to love you in the shadows are the first ones to deny you in the light. But I also learned something else. I learned that strength isn't about never breaking, it's about what you do with the broken pieces. I could have stayed bitter. God knows I had every right to be. I could have let that rejection define me, could have raised my daughters to hate the man who abandoned them before they even took their first breath. Instead, I chose to build something. Every diaper I changed at 3 in the morning, every double shift I worked until my feet bled, every textbook I studied while my babies slept, that was me refusing to let his cowardice determine my daughters' futures. That was me turning pain into purpose. When I got back to Aunt Rosetta's house, she was waiting on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in her old coat with worry written all over her face. I carried the girls inside one by one, still sleeping in their red dresses, and laid them on the couch. Then I sat at the kitchen table and told her everything. She listened like she always did, nodding in the right places, gasping when I described Blake's face, crying when I told her about Gerald's confession. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. Baby girl, she said, you did what your mama would have been proud of. You stood up. You spoke truth. And you did it with grace. Not just your name but the real thing. You could have gone in there angry and vengeful, but you went in there as a mother protecting her children. There's a difference. The weeks that followed were strange. Blake started showing up, awkwardly at first, not knowing how to talk to 3-year-olds, bringing gifts that were too expensive and toys they didn't need. But he kept coming. Every Saturday, then twice a week. He'd sit on the floor and let them climb on him. He'd read them books in a hesitant voice, still learning the rhythm of their favorite songs. He wasn't good at it yet, but he was trying. That counted for something. Gerald came too, less frequently but with intention. He'd bring photo albums showing Blake as a child, helping the girls understand where they came from. He set up trust funds, made sure my nursing school tuition was paid in full, insisted on moving us to a better place. A small house with a yard where the girls could play, not charity but what he called overdue responsibility. Victoria left Blake 3 days after New Year's. The story made the papers. Hampton heir's secret children revealed. The gossip was brutal for a while. People I'd never met had opinions about me, about whether I was a gold digger or a victim or something in between. I stopped reading the articles. I knew my truth. The girls knew they were loved. That was enough. Blake's relationship with his daughters grew slowly, like trust being rebuilt brick by brick. He missed their 4th birthday because of a business trip, and they cried. But he video called at midnight his time, noon theirs, and sang them happy birthday with a cake he'd bought from a bakery in Tokyo. He learned their personalities, that hope needed gentleness, that faith needed firmness, that joy needed attention. He wasn't perfect. He still made mistakes. But he was present. That was more than I'd had for 3 years. I graduated nursing school 18 months after that Christmas. The girls sat in the audience with Blake on one side and Aunt Rosetta on the other, and when they called my name, all 3 of them stood up and screamed, "That's our mama!" loud enough to echo through the auditorium. I cried through the whole ceremony, clutching my diploma like proof that all those sleepless nights had meant something. I got a job at the pediatric ward at Duke University Hospital. Better pay, real benefits, doing work that actually mattered. Sometimes when I'm checking on a sick child in the middle of the night, I think about my own daughters sleeping safely at home, and I feel this overwhelming gratitude for the journey that brought us here. So let me ask you something. What would you have done? If you were in my position, pregnant, fired, abandoned by someone who claimed to love you, would you have had the courage to go back? Would you have risked everything to make sure your children knew their father, even knowing he might reject them all over again? Or would you have taken the money, disappeared, raised them in quiet anonymity where they'd never have to face the man who didn't want them? There's no wrong answer. We all do what we can with what we have. The girls are 7 now. They know their story. Not all the ugly details, but the truth of it. They know their daddy made mistakes, and he's working to fix them. They know their grandfather is trying to be better than he was. They know their mama fought for them when no one else would. And they know they're loved, not in spite of how they came into the world, but because of the strength it took to bring them through it. Blake and I aren't together. We never will be. That ship sailed a long time ago, and honestly, I wouldn't want to board it even if it came back. But we're co-parents now, which is its own kind of complicated. We have dinner together once a month. Me, Blake, the girls, sometimes Gerald. We're not a traditional family, but we're family nonetheless. Aunt Rosetta still says the whole thing was God's plan. I tell her God's plan looked a lot like human choice to me. My choice to come back, Gerald's choice to do better, Blake's choice to show up. She says that's just God working through imperfect people. Maybe she's right. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the people in your own life who deserved better or who stepped up when it mattered most, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had to fight for something everyone said you should just let go. Tell me if you believe in second chances or if some mistakes are too big to come back from. I want to hear your stories. I want to know I'm not the only one who's had to navigate these impossible choices. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Because this channel is about stories. Messy, complicated, painful, beautiful stories about people trying to do their best in circumstances that don't come with instruction manuals. For now, I'll leave you with this. Your past doesn't have to define your future, but it will always be part of your story. The question isn't whether you've been knocked down. The question is what you do when you get back up. Chose to be seen. I chose to let my daughters be seen. And on that cold Christmas Eve when I stood on that doorstep with 3 little girls in red dresses, I wasn't just seeking justice for myself. I was teaching them the most important lesson I'll ever give them. You are not someone's secret. You are not someone's mistake. You are not invisible just because someone chose not to look at you. You matter. You exist. And you have every right to take up space in this world even when, especially when, it's uncomfortable for the people who tried to pretend you didn't exist in the first place. That's my story. That's their story. And now it's your turn to decide what you think about it. Like this video if it moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment with your thoughts, your questions, your own experiences with facing the people who wronged you. And subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this ongoing conversation about resilience, redemption, and what it really means to fight for the life you and your children deserve. Until next time, this is Grace Williams reminding you that your voice matters, your story matters, and no one, no matter how rich, how powerful, or how respected, has the right to silence it. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and thank you for listening.